Welcome to the Daily Horror Habit Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Krieger, bringing you daily reviews of currently streaming horror movies for your twisted pleasure. Be aware that these reviews may include mild spoilers. And as always, I hope you enjoy. This week, Berto and I learn that death isn't the end as we continue our Alien series review with a discussion on the fourth installment, Alien Resurrection, which is currently streaming on HBO Go and HBO Max. Berto, welcome back.
Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, no problem. I'm enjoying reviewing this series with you because as somebody that is such a fan of the first two, I've seen those the most, but 3 and 4 are the two that I think I had seen once and then for whatever reason just never saw them again. So getting to kind of re-experience them and then seeing your first reaction to them has been a ton of fun. So I'm happy to have you back.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it was the first time watching the fourth one and the third one for me. Well, I've seen the third one a while back, but certain scenes, but I haven't seen it fully. But yeah, it's been fun.
Back in the day.
Yeah, that was way back. Yeah.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, Alien Resurrection is directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who's the director of The Lost City of Children. And it's written by Joss Whedon, who's actually the director of the first 2 Avengers movies. So released in 1997, Alien Resurrection picks up 200 years after Alien 3. Ripley, thought to be dead, has been resurrected through genetic cloning and imprisoned on a military science vessel. We learn that her DNA was fused with the Queen alien, resulting in a new hybrid alien. But also, the new Ripley has superhuman powers. Naturally, the aliens that are on board the ship break containment, and it's up to Ripley and a ragtag crew of morally dubious mercenaries to make it out alive. So I believe you watched it as well, the special edition?
Yeah.
Okay, so the special edition is not a director's cut like I thought it was. There's an intro by the director in the version I watched, and he says that he was proud of the theatrical cut, and so it wasn't really them instilling new scenes and whatnot because he thought that they had cut too much, kind of like in David Fincher's case.
Yeah.
They used a lot of footage that they had cut. The special edition has a couple extended bits of dialogue that in the end I don't think are nearly as drastic of a change as a lot of the scenes were in Alien 3.
Yeah.
But most notably is that the opening and the outro to the film are completely new.
Okay.
So the film opens up with that sequence where you see like a close-up of, it looks like a xenomorph mouth, but then it pans out and it's like a bug.
Yeah.
And a guy in like a control tower squishes it. Like that whole segment was reshot for CGI and whatnot because they originally just didn't have the budget for it. And then the outro, which we'll get to later, was also new. Originally, I believe the film ended with them just kind of like flying off into the clouds.
Yeah.
And you're left to assume that they landed on Earth.
Okay, yeah.
But in this, we actually kind of like go down to ground level and we see they land in Paris and it's basically a post-apocalyptic world.
Right.
To a certain extent. But I guess first things first, what'd you think about them bringing our girl Ripley back for a 4th film?
Yeah, it was, I mean, they kind of needed to bring her back because I feel like she's such a key component of the movie and the whole series, but it was kind of weird. I wasn't a fan of the cloning thing, and the story itself was just very bizarre. Like she had like weird long nails and like, I was like, I don't know. I just wasn't a fan of it. I was a fan of the set though. It was really great. I love the fact they brought it back to the ship, like the original one, which was awesome. Everything was dark and very wet and humid and just weird, alien-like. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I thought it was. I wish they could have done a little different. I wasn't a fan of the cloning thing.
Yeah. So originally, Whedon had penned a script that Newt was supposed to be the protagonist, the little girl. So they from Aliens, and they were to clone her instead. But then 20th Century Fox apparently was like, yeah, we're not going to greenlight a sequel that does not have Sigourney Weaver in it.
Right.
They basically assumed that fans just wouldn't show up. And I mean, it's a fair assumption to make, granted that she was in the last 3 movies. And she's synonymous with Alien at this point. You know what I mean? She's been the one recurring kind of character.
Yeah.
So in that regards, I understand why they want to bring Ripley back. But like you, I think my biggest problem is the script.
Yeah.
And it's not so much with the direction. Like I think Jean-Pierre does a really great job of, like you said, building up the atmosphere of the movie, and like the set design and the attention to like all the practical effects and whatnot is really well done. But I think Whedon's script is my biggest issue with it. So I would say that right off the bat, this film feels like a combination of all of the films before it.
Right. Yeah.
Like it feels like it has a little bit of horror in there. It has a lot of action in there.
Yeah.
And then it has this kind of weird amalgamation of like humor in there
Mm-hmm.
that I think is, well, I want to hear what you think about it. What did you think about the kind of tonal shift from the other films?
Yeah.
Or do you agree that this film feels different than all the other ones?
Yeah, definitely. I think it definitely feels different. I didn't like like you said, the script. I wasn't a fan of the script. The story itself was like, I just wasn't a fan of it, like the whole cloning thing. But I did enjoy watching it. Like, I think just the fact that it takes place back in the ship, and it's got this alien feel to it, that they're stuck, and if it has a lot of mix of the third one. Is it the second one with Bill Paxton? Also,
Yeah.
like, a lot of those characters seems to like transform over to this one, like just the macho man like kind of guy who Ron Perlman plays.
Mhm.
I feel like there's a combination of the second one with that military group trained, and a mix of the original one, kind of. At least that's what I got the vibe from. But yeah, like again, I think the cloning just really like kind of messed me up in story wise, I guess. But overall, I thought it was pretty enjoyable. It was pretty good. I liked how dark it was, and there was a little plot twist that I was not expecting in there too, with one of the main characters, I guess.
Yeah, Winona Ryder's character.
Yeah.
Call.
Yeah. I was not expecting it.
Yeah, I'd seen this movie when I was a kid, and I literally probably have not seen this movie in like a decade plus. And the one thing that I remembered, the only thing I remembered actually, was how kind of like weird the characters are, and like especially Ripley herself. And that's again something that I'm not a fan of still with this movie, is that Ripley is just very weird, and there's like this whole creepy relationship with the aliens that we get into later in the terms of like where the plot goes. But overall, just like, I'm not a fan of the way that they brought her character back.
Yeah.
Narratively, it makes sense. And I think as a whole, like, it does make sense, the kind of the connection that they're making, and it serves the story they're telling.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of just her character, she really does not do a lot for me. And like the weird mommy issues stuff with the different aliens and like the hybrid is just super uncomfortable in a way that the rest of the movie is not.
Yeah.
So for me, it's hard to care much for her character.
Yeah.
So I guess it is good then that we have that plot twist later with Winona Ryder.
Yeah.
In that she really is one of the only likable characters.
Right. Yeah.
In a lot of ways, like all the other characters, like you said, are kind of just super aggro and over the top.
Yeah.
Especially Ron Perlman, who, again, like they all have their moments, but like Ron Perlman is fucking hilarious in this. And then obviously you have like Raymond Cruz shows up later, who's Tuco.
Yeah.
And just, it's an interesting band of mercs, and I don't think that there are any real highlights amongst them other than Winona Ryder, to be honest.
Yeah, I feel like Ripley's character kind of, I know she's cloned, but it kind of lost that feeling of human, I guess, because she is cloned. It just, for me, it kind of like separates, like it's not the same, obviously. I don't know. I guess in a way it's good that the way they made her weird, because it's not the same Ripley. It's cloned of her. But at the same time, it just kind of lost that sense of like human within her, like kind of like what we've been following this last 3 movies. It kind of lost that touch.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and in losing the humanity of the movie, it really does lose something, and it kind of just transforms it into almost a completely different category of film. Like I feel like this one is like the superhero equivalent of all of the other alien movies, in that like, okay, so we're going to jump the shark and we're going to bring people back from the dead, that now they have superpowers, and it does lose its horror element in a lot of ways, even if there are moments of horror in there.
Yeah.
Overall though, like if she's going to be able to punch through metal and bend steel and bleed acid blood and all these different things, like it's not really scary anymore. And again, it does have some great horror moments in it. Like we're going to get to some of the things that I think this movie does actually a lot better than I remember it doing in a little bit. But I mean, overall, there's no real suspense for me
Mhm.
in the movie after that. And
Yeah.
she is the human Ripley is replaced with a whole squad now of humans that we're not really invested in,
Right.
and we're
Yeah.
never really given a reason to become invested in them because for the most part, like they're just aggro over the top and they're defined by their level of aggression. And the one captain of the Mercs who just he's got that gravelly smoker's voice and
Yeah.
everything, and it's just like that's his defining trait and all this kind of nothing. There's not a lot of humanity to these characters.
Yeah.
They feel like caricatures almost. Like
Yeah.
I kept comparing this group of characters to the people on the Nostromo
Mm.
from the original
Yeah.
film, and it's like their occupations withstanding, like at least the people on the Nostromo felt like real people,
Yeah.
whereas these people felt very much like action stars.
Yeah. No, I think that I feel like had they had the cast from the original Aliens in this movie, I felt like the connection with that group, it was more close, and you can kind of feel the bond between them. These guys were kind of like they were just meatheads and military guys that just want to kill things, and like they don't even know what they're doing, and like I wish they had more. I wish like I feel like the original group of the movie in the 70s was more like I felt more connected to them than this group, and so it was let's say had they brought that almost similar connection, that cast, to this movie, Ripley, I wouldn't have been annoyed by the fact that Ripley was a clone because you have this connection with this group. But since the way the group was also, they were just like all over the place, kind of felt like. And for me, like I'm kind of annoyed that the captain died. He was the first one to die, I was surprised. I was like,
in a moronic way.
Yeah, it was like it seemed like he should have lasted a little longer. At least some of the other guys should have died first. Like, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's another. Well, before we get to that, in my mind, moronic death. You're right in that the characters themselves, it doesn't even seem like they like each other.
Yeah.
Which I get that they're mercenaries, but again, if those characters don't even like each other and they don't give the audience a reason to like them, then we're not going to give a shit about them. So when they start getting killed off, it's like, okay, they're basically just like meat for the grinder at that point. Getting in between of Ripley or Winona Ryder. And I mean, that's essentially what they are to some extent. And that's kind of where the lack of bond, I think, that you were talking about is missing. And without that bond, so when we have a crew we can't bond with and we have a new version of Ripley we can't bond with, one particular scene withstanding, like there's nobody to really root for or to care about much.
Yeah.
So the engagement kind of weans. But going to that character's death, there's so many little moments in this that I think it just shows all the shortcomings of Whedon's script, and that like they're trying to escape the ship at one point and the guy's got 2 guns already and he's like, oh, there's a third gun. I need a third gun. Like, and he wanders off all the way away from the group just to find one extra gun.
Right.
And it's like, where's the motivation for that? I thought he's supposed to be like this hardened merc leader. And he's like, I'm going to go investigate for another gun. And it's just like little moments like that. They just don't feel very organic. They just feel like they're servicing a death.
Yeah.
And the setup for that is so ridiculous that you're like, yeah, obviously they're about to kill him. Like no good comes from wandering down a dark hallway by yourself for a reason that you don't actually have. You don't need a weapon. You've already got weapons.
Right. Yeah. I just felt very like, especially with that scene with the captain, he was kind of like, just they threw him out there just to get killed. Like they gotta get some action in there, and that's like a lot what it felt like to me. And like some of the guys that just like you said, there's no meaning to them. So it's like it was really hard. It was for me. It was just like I was just watching a movie. There was no connection between me and the characters. Like I just didn't feel connected. Like I felt like the first one with that crew. It just seemed they were so tight. It seems like they were like they knew each other. These guys, they flew together, but there was a disconnection. Like they didn't like each other. A lot of like I felt like there was a lot of tension, like with Ron Perlman's actor, and like a lot of the other guys are just like they were there like a lot of characters were like, oh, I just want to sleep with her and like do this, and it's just like weird connection. Like I'd feel very uncomfortable being in a group like that.
Right. And while the Nostromo crew, I don't know if you would necessarily call them friends.
Yeah.
They were work friends. You know what I mean? Like they would bicker and they would tease one another. And while there's definitely like disparaging feelings in terms of like when they're arguing about the pay between Parker and Dallas. And they're arguing in the first movie, like, I should get paid this and that and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
At least it feels like they have a relationship of some sort.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like they're just people that are thrown together. And there's nothing wrong with presenting a group of people that are not friends with one another. But if that's the case and the relationships are frayed, the individuals themselves, if the conflict isn't interesting, the individuals themselves have to be interesting to some extent, right?
Yeah.
Like, I have to care about these people individually, if not as a group or a collective. And in not doing either of those things, again, it's like they're just fuel for the inevitable xenomorph fire that spreads all amongst the ship.
Yeah, definitely.
And just one last thing before we get into some stuff that I actually think this film does pretty well, that it capitalized on better than the previous film.
Yeah.
Whedon apparently was upset that the film was played straight, in that there's like a lot of horror elements and things to it, and it wasn't constructed like very tongue-in-cheek humorous, but I thought this movie had way too much humor in it. So the idea that the film's humor would be compartmentalized in something that was overall a humorous film, like almost a comedy, an action sci-fi comedy, is just very strange to me. Like, why do you think that would work?
Yeah. I
mean, did the humor do anything for you?
No, I thought it kind of, like, I feel like the tension was building up, and then humor kind of just drops that, and it was like a back and forth build up of tension, like things are about to get weird, and then you have someone say some stupid shit, and then it's like, all right, well, then back to level one. It didn't really help. I felt like had they gone less humor, a little more horror, it would have been more intense. I would have been more focused into the movie, but there's just a lot of back and forth of like trying to be funny, and it wasn't really funny. The jokes didn't really hit me, and I was like, all right, cool. Like, I could see why someone would say that, and like, it's just like, I don't know, I just wasn't connecting with them. I think that was my issue, that I wasn't really connecting with them. So it's like, I wasn't crazy about the humor.
And in the special edition, there's a few more instances of humor, and one that sticks out to me is when Winona Ryder and Vries, the guy in the mechanic who's in the wheelchair, like, he tells this elaborate setup for a joke that's like, what has one eye, two thumbs pointing up, like,
and a tongue out,
tongue out, and likes to fuck or something, and he just points to himself, like, that's an example of a joke that's not in the theatrical version, that is just like crickets, basically, when that line is said.
It's just like a creepy joke. That's a creepy joke.
Yeah, there's a lot of creepiness in the movie that extends past just Ripley's relationship with the aliens. Like, there's a lot of creepy humor in it that, again, it kind of just falls flat, which makes it even creepier. Like, I like that there's some absurdity in the movie. Like, there's one thing where there's a lot of humor that I don't think works, but then there's a level of absurdity that complements the action in some ways that, as an action movie, can be fun. Like, later in the film, there's that scene where they're climbing up the ladder, and it gets to the point where, like, Ron Perlman leans back and starts shooting while he's hanging upside down, and then he sees the spider and he, like, shoots the spider that scared him, and it's like, that's heightened absurdity, but it kind of works in terms of just like over the top action, and you have that brief little moment that doesn't kind of like kill all the momentum in the scene. But then you have a joke like the one I just described, and it's like the camera just lingers there for an extra minute, and it's just like, okay, man, that's great. That was very funny. It was just like, I feel like Whedon has like, I don't know, the humor of a 15-year-old, and it's just like, you're like a 30-year-old man writing that script at the time or something. And it's just like, okay, man, that's great. I would have found that funny in like middle school, I guess. But
there's a lot of creepiness with the characters within each other. It was just like, oh, why would you want to be there? I don't know. I just wasn't. I didn't enjoy those parts.
There's a lot of kind of like little off-putting moments throughout the movie that I'm just like, okay, like and I think getting into the things that we actually enjoy about the movie, his script does a disservice to how good this movie looks in terms of just the portrayal of the world. And I think it's really not fair to Jean-Pierre, who's the director, that he went to all this trouble to ensure that like the claustrophobic look of the sets were similar to the original. We have a good amount of expanding on the story from Aliens, where this takes place 200 years in the future. And they say like Weyland-Yutani's not even a company anymore. But in reality, there's just another company that's replaced them that is trying to weaponize the xenomorphs. And like that lore is pretty interesting, and seeing the extent that they're going, that they're doing human testing to breed aliens. They have a
Yeah.
science facility where they're like cloning people and trying to
Yeah.
get different breeds of aliens going.
That was a gross scene, by the way. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that
a
oh man,
weird.
that
Yeah,
and I mean, do you want to speak to that scene? Like
that
I thought
was
that was a pretty great scene.
yeah. I mean, it was definitely great. It was just kind of nasty how they were testing on them, like different
Right.
breeds of like human xenomorph mix, and then they found that body of basically Ripley's clone whose arm is like stuck, like literally glued to their shoulder, and she's
Mhm.
like, "Just kill me." I was like, "Yeah, I felt that." I was like, "Damn, I would have
Yeah.
asked the same thing." Like
Right.
it was just like
Yeah, and I
creepy.
think that scene that is a really good example
Yeah.
of a scene that is the only moment in the film, other than one other brief scene, that has like some heart to it, that
Yeah.
captures that
Yeah.
character drivenness of the original films. And it feels so out of place because it's such a somber moment where she's wandering through the lab and has the tattoo 8 on her wrist. So we've
Right.
learned that she's the 8th iteration of the clones. And we see that 1 through 7 or 1 through 6 all died and they look like aliens.
Right.
And then we get to 7, who for whatever reason is being kept alive and is like the most mutated.
Right.
And then obviously, like you said, begs Ripley to kill her.
Yeah.
And it's a very poignant moment too, because it just kind of is traumatizing her all over again, basically, and showing that no matter whether it's aliens traumatizing her in films 1 through 3, or now it's humans traumatizing her, that not only can Ripley not catch a break, but it's just her perpetual cycle of dealing with these unforeseen circumstances and whatnot, and her character being in this perpetual state of torment. And I mean, that's a really disturbing moment, like you said. I mean, watching basically yourself beg for you to kill it.
Right.
Like, I don't think it gets more disturbing than that.
I think that was probably one of the few scenes that maybe the only scene that I connected. Like, I felt like with Ripley, I felt that I was like, shit, like she realized like she was cloned and now she's cloned and like she's not human anymore. She clearly knows that because there's a connection with the alien that she feels inside her. But at the same time, it's like, damn, like that's heartbreaking. Like you've seen different versions of yourself, and there's like a baby version that's in a jar with a big brain, and then there's like there's an alien face one, and it was very bizarre. And like I was like, that was probably one of the more meaningful scene I thought in the movie. But then you have right at the end where you have Ron Perlman just coming in and like saying, "Oh, you wasted all that ammo." Right. I was like, "Oh, that." I mean, that was kind of funny. But then he goes, "Woman." I was like, well, to me, I don't know. To me, it was just like during the movie up to that point, we didn't see any woman just like you waste up all these ammo. So I didn't catch to that point. But it was kind of funny that he like kind of rolled up at the end. He was like, "Well, you wasted all the ammo." Up to that point, I was like, "Oh, it was pretty funny." But then he's like, "Women" or something like that, and I was like, "What?" I didn't catch that ending part. I was like,
Whedon has just like a weird tendency not to know when to stop.
Yeah.
Like he keeps going after the punchline almost, and in extending a punchline, it's just like, dude, you just made the joke and you just stepped all over it with an extra couple of words,
unnecessary,
or just lingering on it. Yeah, just unnecessary, and ultimately, like that undercuts that scene for me, and it just kind of that scene really speaks to the imbalances of the script versus the tone of the overall movie that, for the most part, Jean-Pierre is responsible for. In that, like, we have this somber moment, and then there's just an inappropriate use of, not inappropriate in the sense of the subject, but just the inappropriateness of inserting a joke into the most emotionally fraught moments in the entire film. And that's like, what, an hour and 20 minutes into the film or something like that. And it's like, dude, it took you this long to get here and you're really going to kind of like fuck up the dismount on this one positive narrative moment you have. But I mean, going back to Jean-Pierre, again, just the atmosphere is so similar to the Nostromo in a lot of different ways, where we have these kind of this dark corridors and whatnot, the way they're lit, the set design as a whole, and also, like you said, kind of just the grimy aesthetic of what we've come to expect of the alien universe, basically. One of the things that I love about that aesthetic is kind of like, these are multi-billion-dollar spaceships and space stations and whatnot, and yet they all have this like interior that kind of looks like a Siberian gulag, where it's just like sharp, rusty metal all throughout. They couldn't like make anything nice like the Starship Enterprise or whatever. You know what I mean? Like nothing is polished.
It could have gone better lighting or something. Like
right, exactly. Like they spent billions on a spaceship, but then they're gonna
half-ass the interior,
half-ass light bulbs and stuff. But it's an aesthetic that I love, and I think that this film does better than, not better, but I think it's different than Alien 3
Yeah.
in a way that it's just different enough, but it's has the same kind of I guess you would say the most polished, grimy alien aesthetic that they could have.
Yeah, I think it definitely. I personally like the fact that they brought it back to the ship, and it has that feeling of the original one. That really I think they did a great job at that, and just getting that grimy feeling, like you were saying, of being in a ship and you're kind of stuck. And I think, although like you were joking around that they didn't have enough budget to like get nice lighting, I think that definitely helps with everything, like the intensity of like the xenomorphs. You can't really see them, but the xenomorphs are dark, so they can hide in shadows and they blend really well. So I think it really helps with at least the intense moments. It definitely helps that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great segue. Let's jump right into it.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow the xenomorphs look the best that they've ever looked. And that's not something I expected to hold up as well, considering that was our main complaint of Alien 3, is that kind of blue screen, fast motion technique that they were using to make the xenomorphs look really fast, or to make these xenomorphs look really fast in Alien 3.
Yeah.
Like, I assumed that there was going to be more of that in Resurrection, and I was so happy to see that that's not the case.
Yeah.
Like, given that this movie was released 5 years later, and there were a lot of advancements in CGI in that time period, I assumed that there was going to be an over-reliance on CGI. And I was happy to find out that a majority of the film is practical, and even the instances of CGI I thought were really, really well done.
Yeah.
Like, especially the underwater scene.
Yeah.
Like when it has them swimming around and they're dodging grenade launcher rounds and whatnot. Like, that's all CGI for the part where they're maneuvering like that. And I thought that was phenomenal.
Yeah.
To the point that you couldn't even tell that it was CGI almost, I thought.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the fact that there was a huge upgrade in the CGI in general, I think that definitely helped. I really like the scene where they have the xenomorphs in the labs, like in each cage, and then you have that creepy doctor. He's just very weird.
Played by Brad Dourif.
Yeah.
Who he does the voice. You know those slasher movies, the Chucky movies?
Oh, he does the voice for that?
He does the voice for Chucky.
Oh, wow. That's creepy. Yeah. Grittyman, I think his name was. He's a doctor. He has like this weird connection with him, I guess. I don't know. Or he wants to feel connected to him, but that was a weird scene. But I really like the fact that the way the aliens were shown off in that. I really enjoy that. I think one of the fewer scenes where we get to see them fully, like their face, and like you kind of see how smart they are. They're evolving as they go. It was really cool to see. And then the fact that they had 3 of them in one room right before the whole a breakout happened. It was kind of cool. I really enjoyed that. I think they did a great job. Kind of like, I feel like it kind of holds up to the original one with those teeth, and like just in general, I think everything, it looked really great.
Yeah, and that's a great scene, the jailbreak scene when there's 3 of them in that cage, and basically Brad Dourif's character is teaching it. Basically, like, if you fuck with me, I'll freeze you with the fire extinguisher safety or whatever that he's spraying them with. And again, when he goes for it the second time, the xenomorph stops what it's doing because it knows it's about to get sprayed.
Right.
And it does a good job of introducing this idea that while we're dealing also with like a hybrid alien later in the movie, the base xenomorphs are like capable of becoming smart and learning. And it feeds into that idea that Weyland-Yutani might have been onto something in a certain extent. Like they can learn, they can be trained to a certain extent. So I think that scene is pivotal, not only because we get a great kill scene out of it, but also it kind of gives legitimacy to this idea that Weyland-Yutani, which has evolved into whatever company they are now, hasn't been like on this pipe dream.
Right.
And this idea that like that makes it more terrifying, the potential that they could control them and they could use them against whoever they want. They could use them against civilians, they could use them against foreign armies and whatnot. But I do love that scene, in that the xenomorphs have that strategic moment where they're like, well, we're about to sacrifice one person for the greater good. And they go after that one just to have his guts melt through the hull of the ship and whatnot so they can escape. That's a cool moment.
Yeah, that's definitely
it reinforces that they are like the deadliest predators in the galaxy to a certain extent.
Yeah.
What did you think of the kind of puppeteering and the animatronics in the movie? Because again, most of the movie was practical, and I thought it was done in a way that was the strongest it's been.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely held up. It didn't feel like, so I think the third one, it was kind of weird CGI, and I think the mixture of practical and CGI on this one was pretty great overall.
Yeah.
Like even like just like the aliens, they just look sharper. I don't know, to me it seemed like they were sharper in the, and it was kind of cool that we got to see more of their characteristics, in the sense that they were able to adapt, and like we were talking about just a second ago, like they're able to learn, and it's like they're not just like aliens that are hunting. Now they're learning how, I guess, for them to be their predators as humans, like how they work. And it's like they're slowly elevating their knowledge. And I think overall though, they they did a great job with the practical. Definitely one of the cleaner ones, I would say, from the series.
Yeah, the only kind of moment that I thought stood out in terms of the CGI was when they're doing the escape pods, and one of the xenomorphs like climbs up the side of an escape pod and slinks down into it.
Yeah.
Like, that was the only moment where I was like, that's notable CGI. Like, I could tell it's CGI, and it kind of like looks a little off. But I mean, 80% of the rest of the movie, I think the mix of practical and CGI is actually really well done. And a funny little anecdote I found was that when the special effects team, who continued over from Aliens and Alien 3, met with Jean-Pierre was like, yeah, in Alien 3, the egg kind of just looked like the one from the previous film. I didn't think that it looked that realistic. And the original eggs had 4-point movement, so it would be on each of the flaps that open up.
Yeah.
So there's only 4 points of movement on it. And so the special effects team took that as like a challenge, basically, and they included 25 points of movement.
Holy shit.
In the eggs in this one. So I went back and I rewatched that scene when the human test subjects are being impregnated by the facehuggers. And you can see it's not only just the flaps that are moving, but the inside of the egg is like, it looks like something slithering around in there. Yeah, it's disgusting. And there's a level of detail there that really makes you think almost like there's no way that can't be CGI in terms of just all the points of movement. But then it shows, again, the dedication that if you put in the hard work for an emphasis on puppeteering, animatronics, that lead into practical effects, like 20 years later, almost, the movie still looks phenomenal. Or when did it come out?
97.
So like, 97.
Yeah.
And I mean, it holds up in a way that, I mean, there aren't many examples of CGI from the late 90s that holds up that well, or even the early 2000s for that matter. But this film in general, just, again, I'm blown away at how well a lot of the effects hold up, considering what was in the previous film. And it's only a 5-year difference. And I mean, I know technology has a lot of advances in a short period of time, but granted, again, like what we see going from 97 to, like, I don't know, 2004, 2005, like there's a lot of examples of CGI that's just like, this is not aged as well as I remember this being a lot cooler when I was a kid. But getting into like some of our favorite action scenes, because I think this movie is definitely more of an action movie in a way that even part 2, even Aliens was not, in that Aliens kind of felt like it was your traditional military movie, but with an alien setting. And in this, like I had talked about earlier, this kind of has a heightened level of almost absurdity to it, taking it to the high octane levels of something that is like beyond reality, but I thought was still executed on in a pretty decent way.
It was pretty good overall. I actually enjoyed the action scenes. Were pretty cool. They had some kind of cheesy ones, or like Sigourney Weaver and Ripley just like kind of comes from under the dead body and he shoots the head out of it like the alien. It's like, oh, what the hell? Like, that's kind of cheesy, but no, but like going back to the scene you were just explaining with the alien eggs, I thought that was a crazy scene. That was really well done. That was one of my favorite scenes. I'd say it's messed up to the fact that they had people literally just sitting there. They couldn't defend themselves and they just had them basically lay eggs inside them. But I think the whole scene with the egg, it just looked very, very alien-like, and I really liked that. That was definitely one of my favorite scenes. But back to the action, I would say I really liked the scene with the wheelchair guy, where he's kind of like basically going through this building and kind of like raiding it. Basically, he's kind of picking up stuff, and then he like runs into the xenomorph, and he ends up shooting it, and then it starts bleeding on him. And I thought that was a crazy, like, because I feel like that was the first time we see like the alien blood getting in humans, and we get to see how it's like burning him, like literally it's dripping on his ear and his leg, although he can't feel his leg, it's like burning through his leg. That was I've enjoyed that scene.
That's a cool scene. I love the way that that scene is shot too, where he's slowly picking the pieces of
Yeah.
the gun off of his wheelchair and assembling the shotgun. And I love that scene too because, like, especially Ron Perlman's character
Yeah.
was something that is just like bullying the guy the whole time. Like, he throws the knife into his leg.
Yeah, that was
He's
messed
like,
up.
it's not a big deal. He can't feel like
Yeah.
shit like that. But then we come to find out, like, he's probably the most skilled one out of anybody. He's
Yeah.
the only one that he can fly the ship.
Yeah.
He's also the only one that's able to sneak. Well, that's not true, but he's able to sneak a weapon on there, and it kind
Yeah.
of like goes against what characters are led to assume about him, that he's like, a bunch of characters refer to him as dead weight,
Yeah.
and then it comes out that he's the most important character probably
Right.
out of all of them.
He's the most skilled one out of all of them for
Yeah,
sure.
he's the most skilled one, and
Yeah.
I mean, without him,
Yeah.
the rest of them are not getting out of there.
Yeah, they
So
would
this
not have-
idea that they use initially they have characters that use his kind of disability as
a weakness. I guess.
as like a weakness. In actuality, like,
Yeah.
y'all better watch what you say, otherwise you're not going to get on that ship with him
Yeah.
at the end. But I really liked two scenes that I really liked in terms of the action were, first and foremost, the underwater scene,
Yeah. That was.
which I think holds up really, really well. I love that I mean, that's more of a personal thing for me. I hate the idea of like potentially drowning. So
Yeah,
them
that's-
holding their breath for this ludicrous amount of time while
Yeah.
they swim through this flooded kitchen is like giving me anxiety while I watch it. And then they apply the Jaws, essentially like a Jaws element to it, where these xenomorphs are swimming through the water chasing them. Like, that's just terrifying
It's
to
just
me. in so
panic,
many different
anxiety,
ways.
getting
Yeah,
anxiety.
panic, anxiety. And again, like, it's a great example of the CGI that they use, and it doesn't stand out really in terms of like, oh, I can see that looks fake or this and that. I forgot that it wasn't a guy in a suit for that scene.
Yeah.
And there's another instance where they do actually have an actor in a suit in the practical effect costume and whatnot. But for the most part, any of the action that happens underwater is CGI. And some interesting things that I didn't know. Apparently, Winona Ryder had never been in the water since this scene because she almost drowned when she was 12, I guess.
Oh shit.
And so she decided, and she signed on to the movie without reading the script too.
Jeez.
That was another thing. And so I guess like the first day she had an anxiety attack on set about it,
Oh boy.
but then was still able to like power through and film the scene, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah.
And then the actor that they have, Tom Woodruff, who does all the alien practical work,
Yeah.
who's in the suit, they gave him this big ass alien suit. He can't see through it. And for whatever reason, they didn't give him an oxygen tube through the suit. Like, it's a
Yeah.
big fucking suit. You could have fed a tube through there.
Right.
So it got to the point where he would do his takes and he was holding his breath underwater. And then once they yelled cut, they would have to have scuba divers swim up to him and try to fit the oxygen tank in his mouth through that
Jesus.
costume, to the point that he like blacked out and passed out at one point.
What
And it
the-
was just like super over the top,
Yeah.
considering a majority of that scene is CGI with the xenomorphs. It's not even him for most of the scene.
It's just the one scene he passes out.
Yeah,
the one-
exactly.
That's crazy.
But yeah, I just love that scene, and that's a scene that I assumed would not hold up nearly as well as it did, just
Yeah.
because, I don't know, memory doesn't always serve you the best when it's a movie you enjoyed from being a kid. So I was pleasantly surprised to see that held up as well as it did. But also the ladder scene.
Yeah.
What did you think of that?
It was a little cheesy, I thought, with the Ron
Yeah,
Perlman thing. I was like,
definitely.
you need a little weird action in there. And first of all, I feel like it's impossible to shoot a gun hanging upside down, and you're literally your coworkers is right there, or your partner, whatever, is literally right there, and he's hanging. And
Right.
I don't know. It was kind of cheesy, but it was all right.
It was cheesy, but it's one of those moments that I feel like only he could pull off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like to what Whedon said, like, all the other characters play it so straight,
Yeah.
but his character is clearly the comedic relief.
Yeah.
So for anybody else to do it, then Ron Perlman, and he actually did that stunt himself,
Oh,
which
wow.
seems very ill-advised.
Yeah.
And they said the next morning after he did that, he woke up and he just like cut the shit out of the back of his legs
Oh, I can
from
only
hanging off of that
imagine.
ladder. But I mean, if anybody else was to do that, it would have just been like an eye roll moment. But I feel like he's so aggro over the top from the very beginning of the movie
Yeah.
that anybody else doing that just would not make sense.
Right. Yeah. I feel like his character would have done like like you said, I think it fits in his character, and just to do weird shit like that. Because I feel like he's such a meathead military guy, kind of. He's like, he loves action, and like that's, at least that's the vibe I got. He loves action. He's just like a macho man that he would go out of his way to save his friend, to like do some weird shit like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and the last moment that I really liked was the chestburster kill at the end.
Oh yeah,
When
that was actually pretty
so,
good one.
yeah, so the actor that does that is the like mousy guy that they find that was one of the test subjects who, for whatever reason, the xenomorph popped out everybody else but him.
Yeah.
Or the chestburster rather. So overlooking that, like
Right.
he's basically the ticking time bomb that the group has that is running around with the xenomorph in his chest. And the way that he kills the last military guy is so brutal and over the top, where he grabs the guy's head and presses it against his chest for the xenomorph to come out, and then it sprouts through as the guy's forehead. Like, I love that moment. That was a very like horror comedy-esque kill, basically, because it's just so ridiculous and over the top, but
and then
pretty creative.
And then they
in
just
terms
light
of, like,
him up.
Yeah, and then they light him up, of course.
Yeah.
That actor, so his name's Leyland Orzer. And any movie I've seen him in, he always gets it the roughest. Like, he was in Seven. Do you remember him in that?
Oh, is he the guy that gets starved to death?
No, he's not. He's the guy that when they go to the sex club at the end,
there's
like a guy there wearing crazy leather suit with the knife on it, and he's just like telling the detectives all this, like he had to like fuck somebody to death with it. And it's just so aggressive, and it's every time I see that guy's face, it's the first thing I think of.
That's where I saw. I was like, the guy looks so familiar, and that's where. Yeah, he gets it pretty.
He was also in Saving Private Ryan, but anyways, he had a lot of small roles. But I was just like, dude, cannot get it any rougher.
He didn't catch a break in those times. Shit.
Yeah. Other standout performances, though. Who do you think stood out the most for you?
I'd say Call. Her character name's Call. It's played by Winona Ryder. Yeah, Winona Ryder. I think that was pretty cool. I really liked the plot twist with her. I was definitely not expecting it. I really enjoyed her character. I thought it was kind of like the smart kind of person that you needed to have within that group, because like I felt like she was the only one that knew what was happening clearly, and she knew, like, I felt like she was the smartest out of all of them, other than the guy in the wheelchair. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed her character very well. I think the bond that her and Ripley have was pretty cool. It was one of the better ones in this.
Yeah, and I mean, we get that one scene where they're basically in kind of like the chapel area talking, and we have the realization, and then they kind of have a nice little heart-to-heart. And I found out that was actually in the special edition, but was not in the theatrical version. And I was like, how do you cut that out of the theatrical version? It's such it's one of two poignant scenes in the whole movie that kind of reduces these two people that are not human anymore to having some sort of common humanity grounds, basically.
Yeah.
And so just to find out that wasn't in the theatrical, I was just like,
yeah, that kind of,
this is one of the only reasons you can get invested in either of them.
Right. Yeah. I feel like that was a pretty good bonding moment. I feel like that you need to have they should have had that in the theatrical version, because that's where you really get to see them bonding together and really get to know each other. I think it's pretty important, because I feel like there's not a lot of that in this movie. Like, they just know Ripley's a clone and she's an alien mother, I guess, and she has special powers because she can dunk, apparently.
Yeah.
That one scene, I was like, what? I was like, Ripley throwing it down and then dunk.
Yeah.
I was like, but other than that, like, there's no real like bonding. There's no connection between the characters. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think last but not least, the character that stood out to me every single time but was creepy and weird as fuck was Brad Dourif, again, who plays that scientist, where he's like making out with the glass between him and the xenomorph. And then at the end of the film, when we get to the alien nest and we see the hybrid, he's like all wrapped up in a cocoon. And he's like, "You're a beautiful butterfly," and all this weird shit. And it's just like kind of fuels the uncomfortable vibe of that entire movie.
Right.
But I mean, we got to get into it now. The hybrid alien. How are we feeling on that?
Oh, I did not like it. I was not a fan.
Okay. Thank God we're on the same page.
That was weird. Very weird.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of that design at all. No. Which, again, the movie itself, there's such a quality of practical effects that are applied to it and technique and whatnot that really gives us the best looking xenomorphs. We even get a queen in there.
Yeah.
Like, the best that the Queen ever looked.
Hmm.
And then it's like, comes time to design a new alien, a hybrid, and we get this tall, white, humanoid looking thing. And I get that it's a hybrid with a human, but
Yeah.
it looked like a white skeleton, basically.
I didn't like the fact that it had like facial expressions. It was kind of weird. You kind
Yeah.
of lose that alien like, because I feel like we're used to seeing alien always pissed off and angry and
Mhm.
like, and then you have all these weird facial expression when it does them, like it sees its mom and like Ripley and
Yeah.
stuff. It's just like kind of weird. Also their relationship where they like hug each other and they're like rubbing
Yeah,
each other.
I am not a fan of that relationship
Yeah,
at all. That is very
that's a
much a red
creepy.
flag.
Yeah.
I'm calling
Yeah.
Child Protective Services after that. Like, there's an issue going on there that
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of. Yeah, no, the design of it, I'm not crazy about. I don't like that. Like, again, I understand it's a hybrid, but at the
Mhm.
same time, I think it should have been presented more as like an abomination almost, in the sense that, like,
Yeah.
sure, it might have somewhat human qualities, but it's still more alien than human.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that I think would almost be more terrifying than something
Right.
that resembles more of a human than more of an alien.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, if anything, it dumbs down the xenomorph aliens in that it loses its one unique feature where the retractable mouth.
Yeah.
It loses the tail.
Mhm.
So by making it more human, you make it more dull, and it gets
Yeah.
to the point where the only ways that it kills people are it slaps.
Yeah.
It's kind of hilarious how
It's a strong slap.
effortlessly it slaps off the queen's head
Yeah.
after it gives birth, and it's just like, okay, that's a bit much.
Right.
But then also, like, it chews on the top of Brad Dourif's head, and then it squishes the last Marine's head, and it's
Yeah.
just like, these are very conventional ways of killing people
Mhm.
that I feel like the amount of creativity and talent that's there, they should have been able to come up with something
Yeah.
more unique. Like, if you're going to be allowed to play within this universe that has very limited rules and a lot of creativity, then do something creative. Don't do something that we've seen countless times.
Yeah, I feel like had they stuck with the same model of alien, like the alien shape, had they
Mhm.
had him given more of a human like thinking process, I think that would have been pretty creepy. Like just be
Yeah.
like it's smarter than all the other aliens. I think that would have kind of like it would not have been as bad. I feel like the fact that they changed the way it looks, it lost
Mhm.
that sense of alien. Like to me,
Yes.
they should have given them the smart process, the process of a human being, where it knows, it could smell, and it could sense. It basically evolves into a human version, in the sense of their senses of where things are
Right.
and kind of thing, the way it thinks.
Yeah, because I know from the extended universe stuff in the comics, there's a bunch of different types of xenomorphs, and one of them is like white, and it was the color palette of that one that reminded me of the color palette in this one where it's white, and I was like you said, had this been, it looked more familiar to a xenomorph,
Yeah.
but have a different color palette, and then display some type of superior human intellect,
Hmm.
I think would have definitely been more interesting. And they could have even had the comedic moment in there where if the xenomorph is able to think like a person,
Yeah.
it can anticipate what her moves are going to be,
Right.
basically. And it could have had a moment where it like outsmarts her. That could have been kind of funny or something
Right.
like that. But to get like this gross human looking thing
Like a
that is
skull
just super
face, yeah.
strong,
Yeah.
and it's just like, it just didn't do anything for me
Yeah.
in a way that was actually pretty disappointing, because up until that point, I thought a majority of like the humor and the narrative kind of stuff withstanding, like from an action sci-fi standpoint,
Very
like,
enjoyable.
this is a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed
think.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, in a lot of different ways. But I guess, so after they kill the hybrid alien, what'd you think of the ending? Because this is the first time that we see Earth in the entire series.
I thought it was cool. I feel like that ending was definitely, for some reason I was like, that the ending's definitely not on the original version. Just it didn't seem, I don't know, to me, but I really enjoyed it. I think it was cool to see, because throughout this whole series we're always in space in a different planet. This is the first time we go back into Earth and we see what actually happened to Earth. I was thinking, oh, they see the sunset, or sunrise, whatever one, and then it's like, I was thinking, oh, everything's fine in Earth, but then when they actually showed that Earth is literally melted down and everything's
Yeah.
apocalyptic, I was like, oh,
Mhm.
that's kind of cool. We actually get to see what Earth looked like this whole time. I
Yeah.
like the ending. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, me too. I think if I'm not mistaken, the theatrical version ends with them just in the clouds and there's the sunset,
Mm,
basically, or the sunrise, and they don't even touch the planet. Whereas in the special edition, this was the intended original ending. They just didn't have the budget for it.
yeah.
And in getting to see a post-apocalyptic Paris, I thought that was really interesting because it kind of gives a justification for the space race, basically.
Yeah.
Why people are trying to leave the planet,
Right.
essentially. And we see like, oh, the Earth's even more fucked up than it is right now.
Yeah.
So it's just like, is that a potential future that we could see where if like we don't start taking better care of our planet, this is the result, and we're going to end up in space and then unleash a whole new can of worms up in space. But as somebody that's obviously a fan of all these movies and we never see Earth again in the series, I thought for this the 4-pack of movies, like it's a pretty good ending.
Yeah.
Even though obviously we learn it is not the definitive ending because as we'll get into, there's still 2 more installments for us to watch. But so, I mean, in wrapping up Resurrection, we wouldn't see a xenomorph on screen for about 7 more years in the movie. I mean, you would see, it was in Predator,
Right.
but I mean, or Predator 2 rather, there's that moment where we have a skull, but that came out before this. So,
Right.
I mean, 7 years later, we finally get to see another xenomorph. But other than that, I mean, this series was stagnant for so long. So I was glad to see, like, even though you and I actually reviewed AVP on another podcast, and even though we weren't as fond of it as we remembered it being for a lot of things, like getting to see the xenomorphs on screen again was great. And it kind of has me excited to jump into Prometheus and Alien Covenant. But before we kind of lay out our plans for the next phase of our Alien series review, I thought I'd share some last minute facts and just get your reaction to them.
All right, let's do it.
So originally, Danny Boyle, the director behind 28 Days Later, and David Cronenberg, who directed the Fly remake, both turned down the opportunity to direct this movie.
Oh.
Which, I mean, I think it would have been crazy to see Cronenberg. I don't know if you're familiar with his movies, but David Cronenberg does a lot of like body horror movies, which are all about like people's bodies being destroyed.
Oh, that would have definitely taken it to a horror. Definitely.
Yeah, I think there would have been more of an a horror emphasis if he had been directing. And I think that if he had been directing, we would have gotten a much better hybrid Alien in terms of just like adhering to his style of just fucked up things that he can come up with, because he makes weird movies.
I feel like we would have probably seen definitely more gruesome kills. And sure. I think it would have been nice, actually. I mean, had we had more of going back to the original one where they were in space and it was more horror, I think it would have been a good wrap up for the first 4 movies, I guess. I think it would have been pretty cool to see that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So that basketball scene that you mentioned where Ripley shoots a 3-pointer behind her back without looking, that scene took 2 weeks of training. And after like numerous failed attempts, one day she showed up to set and they shot and she got it on the first take.
Oh, shit.
Which is insane. And Ron Perlman actually apparently almost fucked up the scene because as soon as it went in, he like looked right in the camera and was just like, oh my God. Like, because he couldn't believe that she had nailed it finally. And they had to edit around that in a way but initially they were like, oh, we have to do it again. Like, it's completely ruined.
Oh, damn. Yeah, that seemed like it was one of those scenes. I was like, I don't know if I was trying to figure out whether it's CGI or not. I was like, it's kind of hard to like look over your shoulder.
That was what they suggested, because Jean-Pierre was like, basically, we're going to do some crafty editing to make it look like you made it.
Yeah.
And Sigourney Weaver was basically like, nobody's going to believe that.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to believe that I made that. And when they finally did get it, Jean-Pierre was like, yeah, but nobody's going to believe that you did that yourself.
Yeah.
And Sigourney Weaver was like, well, I'm going to tell everybody that I did.
Oh,
and so when they were doing the press tour, basically, she would always make a point to mention that she did that herself 100%.
That's pretty cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Damn.
So in the scene that we see the Queen alien, apparently all of the original molds and puppets that they used for the Queen in previous films was destroyed.
Oh, what?
They were either destroyed or they were damaged, so they couldn't use them. So the prop for the Queen that they used was actually from the personal collection of somebody that was a fan with Alien.
Oh, wow.
Of Alien, and just had it in their personal collection, and they somehow got in contact and borrowed it. The studio borrowed it.
That's awesome. I feel like that's always a kind of a neat little like unique touch to it. Like I've seen definitely in like, for example, like in just completely separate, but like in Star Wars, Mandalorian, they used a lot of comic fans or like Star Wars fans. They brought in as like part of the troopers, in one of the
Oh
scenes.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like it's kind of cool to have that connection with your fan, like especially fans of like the series and like the movies they've been watching forever. I think that's awesome. That's a little
I I forgot to check, but I would not be surprised if that person that lent them the Queen prop
mm,
had like a special thanks in the credits.
oh yeah, that would
I would
have
not be surprised if their name was in there, but again, I didn't check,
been
and I couldn't find who they were or anything
yeah.
like that. But that's just one of those things that I thought would be kind of cool.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and then one of the things that the studio pushed for that I think they definitely should have won, but they did not, was that the studio wanted to cut the scene preceding Ripley's encounter with the alien queen, where she's like writhing around in the xenomorphs.
Yeah.
She's like laying with them
That
and they're
was
like engulfing her into the floor.
yeah.
They wanted to cut that because they thought it was too sexual. And apparently Sigourney Weaver threatened to not promote the movie if it was cut.
Yeah.
And that scene makes me super uncomfortable.
Yeah,
So I'm not thrilled that that's in that.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of those weird scenes. It's like
Yeah.
a lot like when like she like rubs on the xenomorphs and stuff like that, and like
Mhm.
I was like, you don't need like I'm okay. Like I know that they were born off of her, and that's all we need to
Right.
know. Like we don't need to. Yeah, that was a very uncomfortable scene. First of all, I thought she
Yeah.
was naked for a moment. I was like, why is she naked? And why
Right.
is she getting sucked into the floor? It was very bizarre.
Yeah. That's a scene I could have lived without because that haunts me in more ways than one.
Yeah.
And then finally, like Sigourney Weaver was very well. She was on the record essentially as like, we're gonna resurrect. Like, why are we gonna make another one of these movies? I thought I was dead, and was against being in another one of these.
Mm.
And the only thing that changed her mind was she said that the studio basically drove a dump truck filled with money to her house
Oh, well,
and persuaded, like, threw enough money at her that she was like, yeah, I think I'll give you guys 5 or 6 months to make this movie or whatever.
yeah. Well,
But she was paid $11 million, which was the budget of the very first Alien movie.
oh wow,
So
really?
came full circle for her.
Yeah, that's a win-win for her. Shit.
Yeah. And I mean, if anything, this is like the weirdest performance that she gave in the series
Yeah.
so far. And there isn't a, I mean, I don't really know how to say it. Like it's not that there isn't a whole lot of acting there, but I mean, it doesn't have the emotional peaks
Mm.
that the other films do. So
Yeah.
the idea that this was her most profitable role, but then she doesn't have as much kind of like emotional turmoil in the film as the other
Yeah.
ones, like it's pretty crazy. But again, she does, I think she did a lot of the stunts, and we've got those 2 really good heart to heart
Mm.
scenes. So it was well worth, she definitely earned her check on that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in wrapping out Alien Resurrection, I'm more than excited to check out Prometheus
Yeah.
again for what, the 10th time.
Yeah.
Like, you and I have an issue with
Yeah.
your significant other even makes fun of
We
us
love that
for the
movie.
amount of times
So
that we've
good.
watched this movie. But yeah, next up we're going to be reviewing Prometheus, which is the origin story essentially for the Alien franchise, and then we'll follow that up with Alien Covenant.
Mm.
And then I think we'll see how far we get into it. But after Alien Covenant, obviously there are no more Alien films right now. We might have a special surprise of a type of Alien extended universe media that we will review, but we'll keep that a secret for now.
Yeah.
But overall, Alien Resurrection, fan or not a fan?
I was a fan. I enjoyed it. It had its weird moments. Also, we forgot to bring up the fact that Call was an android.
Oh yeah,
That was
that was the plot.
the
twist.
plot twist, which I was not expecting. I just thought of that. I was like, we didn't even talk about it. Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool. The fact that they brought back, again, it ties back to the original one where there's an android and this group of people, and they're not aware that it was an android. It was kind of
Mhm.
awesome. We only find
Yeah.
out because she gets shot and she falls, and everybody was like, "Oh, she dies." I was like, she seems like a pretty big important character. She's one of the important characters, and I was like, why would they kill her off already? But then we find out he's an android. I was like, oh, it was kind of
Yeah,
it was
that is a
curveball
good
for
scene,
me.
and
Yeah,
that's a great twist that adds like another complex layer to her character, because
yeah,
there's always something about her character that you're not really sure about
Mm.
initially. So then to have that kind of extra added layer,
yeah,
you're right. I think that's a great plot twist, and just another layer of complexity to a character that on the surface seems very reserved, but at the same time just not all that remarkable. Like
Yeah.
she's the most tonally muted character compared to all the other aggro people that kind of like leave their mark on every scene in a way that is very overbearing.
yeah.
But then you find out in the end that she is the one that is the most knowledgeable about everything.
Right. Yeah. She's like, overall, I feel like as part of the group, she seems like the least the one that makes the least noise to say. Like she doesn't get
Mhm.
like she does get in trouble because she breaks into like the one of the restricted areas, but she doesn't like seem like a big mouth, or like she doesn't talk shit to anybody, or she doesn't have that attitude to her,
Mhm.
which is kind of nice to kind of see. At least you have someone to kind of balance out all that. But yeah, it was kind of cool. I really enjoyed that little twist, and overall, I thought the movie was really good. Other than the weird scenes, like I said, I
Yeah.
enjoyed it very well.
Yeah, I think as a hybrid, much like the hybrid aliens, like
Hmm.
this movie is a great hybrid of all of them,
Yeah,
or it's an enjoyable hybrid. I don't know about great, but I think that it does a good job of kind of blending sci-fi. There's a couple of sprinklings of horror in there, and there's an added emphasis on action and humor, where I think the action, for the most part, with the type of movie it
yeah,
is pretty entertaining, and it switches things up. It's not kind of one note.
yeah,
I mean, the humor in the script, I think, are the biggest shortcomings, though, still, because I think Jean Pierre, like, I couldn't have asked him to do a better job of creating an atmosphere that feels in line with Alien and the universe as a whole.
hmm
So in that regard, like, this was his first. I think this was his first English language film because he's French.
Oh wow,
So for this to be his first kind of U.S. audio or English speaking film, like,
yeah,
couldn't think of a better debut for that.
yeah. He did
But
a great job at that. I mean, I feel like it'd be very very hard to work with other people that speak other language other than yours. So it's like,
yeah, so that was one of the things they
yeah,
said, that some of the actors were hesitant because they were going to work with the director that they could communicate only through
translator. Yeah,
translators.
yeah,
Like that was one of the things that Sigourney Weaver said when she was before signing on, was that she didn't know, she'd never had that working relationship.
Mm,
And so it's like you have to have a personal relationship with your director. And
right.
it's like, does a language barrier interfere
Yeah.
with that too much? And I would say for the most part, like, no.
No, yeah. I think yeah.
I mean, I would have preferred this guy to have for Jean Pierre to have written it maybe himself, or
Yeah.
to had a different director, but
Yeah, I feel like
a different writer. But
that was like kind of their weakness, their script and the lines and stuff. I feel like they could have worked better on that. But overall, I think it was really great. It definitely, had it been a little more horror, it would have brought me right back to the first one. Because like just the set, the scene where it takes place and everything, it kind of has that vibe of the original Alien. And yeah, overall, yeah, I thought it was really good.
it was definitely better than I remembered. But
Yeah,
I'm super excited to chat about Prometheus
I
with you
can't
next
wait.
time.
Yeah, that's gonna be a good one. That's one of my favorite.
Yeah. Well, we promise we'll keep that one under 2 hours.
Yeah, we'll try.
Got a lot to say.
Yeah,
But thanks again, man.
thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Daily Horror Habit on your preferred streaming service and follow @Daily Horror Habit on Instagram and @Daily Horror Pod on Twitter.